You two back there. This section isn't for kids like you. Jackson Reynolds didn't whisper. He didn't glance around to see who was listening. He wanted the cabin to hear him. Row 2, first class. Zoe and Zoey Thompson stood frozen, holding their carry-ons. Identical 13-year-old twins. Identical stunned expressions. Their boarding passes had scanned fine. Their names matched the manifest. But now, in front of 12 first-class passengers and 3 crew members, they were being treated like trespassers. "Excuse me." Zoe blinked, one hand still gripping the seat's armrest. Her sister Zoe remained silent, eyes wide. The man's tone didn't waver. His name tag read, Jackson R. "I said this cabin is reserved for premium adults. We must have had a booking glitch. Please take your things and follow me to the back." A sharp hush fell over the cabin. The man in 2D lowered his Wall Street Journal. The woman in 1A paused mid-sip of her champagne. No one said a word. Zoe's ears burned. Zoe, the quieter twin, reached into her backpack with shaking hands. "We have first-class tickets," she said, voice soft but steady. "Our grandmother booked them." "That's adorable," Jackson cut in. "But I'm afraid that's not how this works. This cabin is not a school field trip." He held out a manicured hand. "Let's not make this difficult. You can sit where you belong." Zoe looked around silently, pleading for someone to intervene. The businessman in his tailored suit, the older woman with pearl earrings, the couple who had smiled at them during boarding. They all looked away. Jackson reached for their tickets, the papers crisp in his hand. With a deliberate motion, he tore them in half. The sound echoed in the silent cabin. Earlier that morning, the Thompson family home in Brooklyn Heights had buzzed with excitement. Well before sunrise, Diana Thompson helped her daughters pack the last of their essentials. "Mom, do you think we packed too much music?" Zoe asked, carefully sliding her sheet music into a leather folder. Diana smiled at her daughter. At 13, both girls were already accomplished musicians. Zoe, with her classical piano training, meticulous and disciplined. Zoe, with her jazz saxophone, innovative and bold. "You can never have too much music," Diana replied, zipping Zoe's carry-on. "Besides, this isn't just any performance. This is the International Youth Music Conservatory in Paris. With judges from Juilliard and the Paris Conservatory," Zoe added, bouncing on her toes. She'd been practicing her solo piece for months. The invitation had arrived 6 months ago, an honor extended to only 20 young musicians nationwide. Zoe and Zoey had submitted separate audition videos, never expecting both would be selected. Their grandmother Eleanor, upon hearing the news, had immediately booked their first-class tickets as a gift. "You've earned this," Eleanor had told them during their last video call. "All those early mornings, all those hours of practice. Now you fly with your heads high." Diana checked their passports one more time. "Your grandmother will meet you in Paris. She's flying in from Brussels after her keynote." Eleanor Thompson wasn't just any grandmother. As a former Federal Aviation board member and current international consultant, she rarely talked about her work with her granddaughters. They knew she attended important meetings and sometimes appeared on news segments about air travel safety, but the full extent of her influence remained a mystery to them. "Remember what Grandma always says?" Diana told them as she adjusted Zoe's collar. "You belong everywhere you've earned the right to be." The taxi ride to JFK had been filled with excited chatter. Zoe had practiced French phrases while Zoe reviewed her performance schedule. They wore matching navy hoodies, hair braided identically, their traveling uniform as they called it. At the check-in counter, the agent had smiled warmly. "First time flying alone, girls." When they nodded, she added, "Well, you're in for a treat in first class. Make sure to save room for the chocolate souffle." They had walked toward the gate with confidence, boarding passes clutched tightly. This was their reward for years of dedication. Zoe had risen at 5 a.m. every day for 4 years to practice before school. Zoe had given up weekends and summer camps to perfect her technique. When they first boarded the plane, Zoe had immediately FaceTimed their mother. "Look, Mom, we got our own pods. It's like a spaceship." The excitement in her voice was palpable as she panned around the spacious first-class cabin. Zoe had already settled in Sketchpad, out working on her drawing of the Eiffel Tower. Their fingers were still sore from weeks of rehearsals. This wasn't just a vacation, it was a victory trip. Now, just minutes later, it had all unraveled. Jackson Reynolds held the torn tickets between his fingers, expression unmoved by the shock on the twins' faces. "But," Zoe started to protest. "There are plenty of seats in economy," Jackson interrupted. "Which is where you should have been booked in the first place." Zoe reached for her sister's hand, squeezing it tightly. Years of performing had taught them to control their emotions, but this was different. This wasn't stage fright. This was humiliation. Walter Reed, the businessman in 2D, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He glanced up from his newspaper, lips parted as if about to speak, then pressed them firmly shut and returned to his reading. Sophia Mendez, the woman in the white dress sipping champagne, set her glass down with a soft clink. Her eyes met Zoe's briefly before darting away. "These are our seats," Zoe insisted, her voice rising slightly. "Our grandmother paid for them. You can't just—" "I can and I am," Jackson replied. "This is a matter of appropriate cabin allocation. Now please collect your things before we delay takeoff." Another flight attendant, Heather, approached quietly. "Is everything okay?" she whispered to Jackson. "Just a booking error," he replied loud enough for everyone to hear. "These children were incorrectly assigned to first class." Heather's eyes flickered between Jackson and the twins. She opened her mouth as if to question him, then thought better of it. "Follow me, please," Jackson instructed the girls, gesturing toward economy class. His tone made it clear this wasn't a request. Zoe looked around once more, hoping someone would intervene. The cabin remained silent. 12 adults. Not one word of protest. "Come on," Zoe whispered to her sister, tugging gently at her sleeve. "It's not worth missing our flight." The twins gathered their belongings, cheeks burning with embarrassment. As they followed Jackson through the cabin, past the wide leather seats, past the silent faces, the thick blue curtain between first class and economy might as well have been a wall. When it swished shut behind them, it felt like a door slamming in their faces. Jackson pointed to 2 middle seats in row 34, separated by a stranger. "These are available." "We'd like to sit together," Zoe said quietly. Jackson sighed dramatically. "Sir," he addressed the man in 34B, "would you mind switching to 34D so these two can sit together?" The man, annoyed at the disruption, grudgingly moved. The twins slid into their new seats, the narrow space a stark contrast to the pods they'd briefly occupied. As Jackson walked away, Zoe whispered, "Did that really just happen?" Zoe didn't answer. She was staring at the torn boarding pass still clutched in her hand. Seat 34B smelled like burnt coffee and cleaning wipes. Zoe sat stiffly, arms folded across her chest. Zoe settled next to her in 34C, careful not to brush elbows with the fidgety woman beside her. "This isn't happening," Zoe muttered. "We didn't do anything wrong." "I know," Zoe whispered. She pulled out her phone and typed fast. "They moved us out of first class. No reason. Tore our tickets." She hit send. The message went to their mother, who by now would be heading to work, unaware of what had happened. Zoe's voice was rising. "Did you see how that man looked at us like we didn't belong, like we were faking it?" Zoe glanced around the crowded cabin. A toddler cried 2 rows back. A man coughed into his sleeve. Nobody here knew who they were, what they'd worked for, what it meant to them to sit in those first-class seats. "He didn't even ask our names," Zoe whispered. "Just decided." "Mom's going to raise hell," Zoe said, trying to laugh, but it came out flat. "She's probably already on the phone." Zoe didn't respond. She was staring at the torn ticket on her screen, the one that clearly said, "Passenger Zoe Thompson, seat 2B first class." A flight attendant, not Jackson, passed by with the drink cart. She didn't make eye contact with the twins. "Should we tell her what happened?" Zoe asked. Zoe shook her head. "What's she going to do? The plane's about to take off." The captain's voice came over the intercom, welcoming passengers to Skyway Airlines Flight 219 New York to Paris. As he detailed their route and expected weather, Zoe thought about their grandmother waiting in Paris. Eleanor Thompson didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "What do you think Grandma Eleanor will say?" Zoe whispered. Zoe's expression hardened. "Remember what she always tells us. The silence isn't neutral. It's a side." Zoe nodded slowly, looking back at the blue curtain separating them from first class. 12 adults had watched them being removed. 12 adults had chosen silence. The plane began to taxi, its engines rumbling beneath them. Zoe closed her eyes, trying to focus on the competition ahead, but all she could see was Jackson Reynolds tearing their tickets in half. Beside her, Zoe typed furiously into her notes app, documenting everything that had happened. The exact words, the faces, the silence. "What are you doing?" Zoe asked. "Making sure we remember," Zoe replied. "Every detail." Halfway across the world in a polished glass tower overlooking the Seine, Eleanor Thompson stood before a boardroom filled with industry executives. Her presentation, Ethics Beyond the Balance Sheet, ESG Failure Thresholds in Aviation, had the room captivated. At 72, Eleanor commanded attention not with volume but with precision. Her charcoal suit and silver hair projected an aura of authority that had served her well for decades in an industry dominated by men. "The ethical infrastructure we build today," she was saying, "will determine the industry's resilience tomorrow. Not just financially, but—" Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Eleanor ignored it. When presenting to the International Aviation Ethics Committee, interruptions were unprofessional. It buzzed again. Then a third time in rapid succession. Eleanor paused mid-sentence. 3 calls in a row meant family emergency, a protocol she had established with her daughter and granddaughters. "Excuse me," she said to the room, her voice calm. "I need a brief moment." She stepped into the hallway, closed the door behind her, and answered the phone. "Mom." Diana's voice was tight with anger. "It's the girls." "Are they hurt?" Eleanor asked immediately. "No, but they were humiliated. They were in first class. They had tickets, the ones you bought. The airline staff pulled them out. Said it wasn't for them. Tore their tickets in front of everyone." Eleanor's expression didn't change, but her grip on the phone tightened. "Which airline?" "Skyway Airlines. Flight 219 JFK to Paris. They're in economy now. Zoe's furious. Zoe's gone quiet." "I'll handle it," Eleanor said simply. "Mom, this is outrageous. I'm going to call the airline and—" "Diana," Eleanor interrupted gently. "Let me handle this. Trust me." After ending the call, Eleanor stood still for a long beat. Then she turned and walked, not rushed, not panicked, to her private office at the end of the hall. Inside, she locked the door and moved to her secured terminal. She inserted a physical key from her necklace, scanned her thumbprint, and entered a 16-digit code from memory. Her assistant, Carlos, knocked softly. "Ms. Thompson, you still have the closing panel in 15—" "Not anymore," she replied without looking up. "Cancel my appearances for the next 48 hours. Tell them it's a family matter." "Of course," Carlos replied, concern evident in his voice. "Is everything all right?" Eleanor didn't answer immediately. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, entering a series of commands. Command Black Flag Override. User E. Thompson, LVL5A. Target Skyway Airlines. Violation non-humane conduct. Unprovoked removal of minor passengers. Status escalate. The screen flashed. Black flag engaged. Ethics score suspended. Compliance pending. Eleanor stared at the confirmation message. In 30 years of building aviation ethics infrastructure, she had never activated this protocol. The black flag override was the nuclear option designed for the most egregious violations of passenger dignity. She picked up the phone again. "Get me Dr. Amara Okafor, chair of the ESG Emergency Review Board," she told Carlos. "Tell her the Thompson Protocol is live." Back on the plane, Zoe fidgeted with her hoodie string tugging hard enough to fray the end. "You think she's mad?" she asked her sister. "Grandma Eleanor doesn't get mad," Zoe replied. "She gets surgical." They didn't know yet, but in 3 minutes, Skyway's ESG compliance rating would drop to non-humane-centric, a classification never before issued. In 7, 3 global banks would freeze a total of $900 million in active green funding tied to the airline. And in 36, the CEO of Skyway Airlines would call an emergency meeting with the board to ask one terrified question. Who the hell is Eleanor Thompson? Eleanor Thompson had never intended to revolutionize aviation ethics. 40 years ago, as a young black woman with a law degree and a passion for regulatory frameworks, she had simply wanted the industry to recognize a basic truth. Dignity wasn't a luxury amenity. Her office in Brussels was understated. No awards on display, though she had many. No photos with presidents or prime ministers, though she had advised them. Just one framed picture Eleanor at age 25 standing beside her late husband, James, both holding their infant daughter, Diana, outside their first home. James had been her anchor, an engineer who understood systems, both mechanical and human. When Eleanor first proposed the concept that would eventually become AERO-Core, James had stayed up 3 nights straight helping her map the technical architecture. "They'll fight you," he'd warned. "Not because it's wrong, but because it's right in a way that costs money." He'd been correct. The Aviation Ethics Regulatory Oversight Core System, AERO-Core, was initially dismissed as impractical idealism. Airlines balked at the idea of tying ethics compliance directly to financial mechanisms. Regulatory bodies feared overreach. But Eleanor was patient. She began with small wins, first connecting minor ethics violations to insurance premiums, then developing transparency metrics that passengers could view before booking. Each step built upon the last, creating an infrastructure so integrated that dismantling it became impossible without dismantling the industry itself. When James died suddenly of a heart attack 15 years ago, Eleanor had nearly abandoned her work. What drove her forward was finding his notes on what he called the Thompson Protocol, an emergency override designed to halt operations when ethics failures reached critical levels. "Some violations are so fundamental," his notes read, "that the only appropriate response is immediate system-wide accountability." Eleanor had refined his concept, embedded it deep within AERO-Core's architecture, and then deliberately never mentioned its existence to the airlines that adopted her system. It was the fail-safe that no one knew existed, until now. As she stood in her office watching the initial alerts propagate through the system, Eleanor thought of her granddaughters. Zoe with her fierce sense of justice, Zoe with her quiet determination. Both of them humiliated for daring to sit in seats they had rightfully earned. Carlos appeared at her door again. "Dr. Okafor is on line 1. She says the override is unprecedented." "It was designed to be," Eleanor replied, picking up the phone. "Eleanor." Dr. Amara Okafor's voice was tense. "The system is showing a black flag override for Skyway Airlines. Is this an error?" "No error, Amara. The protocol is functioning exactly as designed." "This will freeze nearly $1 billion in ESG funding within the hour. 3 airports are already flagging compliance concerns." Eleanor sat down, her posture straight as ever. "My granddaughters were forcibly removed from their first-class seats today. Their tickets were torn up in front of them. No questions asked, no names checked. Just a flight attendant who decided 2 young black girls didn't belong there." Silence on the line. Then, "I see." "Do you?" Eleanor asked quietly. "Because Skyway Airlines doesn't. Not yet." "The board will need documentation," Amara warned. "This level of response requires It's already uploading to the secured server. Passenger manifest ticket confirmation and a text message description of the incident. The Thompson Protocol was designed for exactly this scenario when airlines forget that ethics isn't just a score on a dashboard. It's about how they treat real people. After ending the call, Eleanor walked to her window overlooking the city. In the reflection, she could see her younger self, the woman who had been told repeatedly that her ideas were too ambitious, too idealistic. The woman who had built anyway. "James," she whispered to her reflection, "I think it's time." 3 floors below Eleanor's office, in a temperature-controlled server room, AERO-Core hummed with activity. What appeared to most industry insiders as a simple ethics monitoring dashboard was in reality a complex neural network connecting every major financial, regulatory, and operational system in global aviation. To understand AERO-Core's true power required understanding its architecture. At its foundation lay 3 interconnected layers. The first layer, visible to airlines, was straightforward: ethics compliance metrics, tracking everything from passenger complaints to employee treatment, from accessibility accommodations to environmental impact. The second layer, visible only to regulators and ethics boards, monitored patterns invisible to individual airlines: cross-carrier discrimination incidents, multi-airport compliance failures, industry-wide treatment disparities. The third layer, known only to Eleanor and a select few architects, was AERO-Core's true innovation autonomous response protocols that could trigger without human intervention when certain thresholds were crossed. What made the system revolutionary wasn't just its monitoring capability, but its direct integration with ESG funding mechanisms. As sustainable investment had grown exponentially over the past decade, Eleanor had positioned AERO-Core as the gold standard for verifying aviation ethics compliance, a prerequisite for accessing the trillion-dollar ESG market. Airlines that signed on to AERO-Core gained preferential rates from ESG-focused lenders. Airports granted better gate assignments and landing slots to AERO-Core compliant carriers. Insurance companies offered reduced premiums. The result, a financial ecosystem where ethical behavior wasn't just morally right, it was economically necessary. On one of the secure terminals in the Brussels headquarters, AERO-Core's monitoring dashboard displayed a world map dotted with thousands of glowing points, each representing an active flight. Most glowed green, indicating normal operations. Several dozen shone yellow, highlighting minor compliance concerns. But one flight, Skyway 219 from New York to Paris, now pulsed an angry red. And from that red dot, like a digital infection, warning signals propagated outward, reaching first Skyway's other active flights, then its hub airports, then its financial partners. The Thompson Protocol. AERO-Core's emergency override wasn't merely suspending a compliance score. It was raising a system-wide alarm that rippled across institutional boundaries. Skyway Airlines compliance status suspended. Black flag priority alert. Category non-humane-centric conduct. Automatic notifications dispatched to 17 ESG financial institutions, 42 partner airports, 3 aviation regulatory bodies, 7 insurance underwriters. For any other ethics violation, the system would require human review before triggering financial consequences. But the Thompson Protocol was different, designed specifically for dignity violations against vulnerable passengers. Once activated, it bypassed normal review channels, implementing consequences first and requiring justification later. On her secure terminal, Eleanor accessed the visualization dashboard showing AERO-Core's network connections. Green lines represented normal data flow. Yellow indicated increased monitoring. Red showed active restrictions. Within minutes, the Skyway Airlines node at the center of the display was surrounded by a web of red connections, each representing a frozen financial, operational, or regulatory relationship. Carlos entered with a tablet displaying breaking financial news. Breaking Skyway Airlines ESG rating, suspended 900 milers in green financing frozen. "It's working," he said quietly. Eleanor nodded. The Thompson Protocol wasn't designed for punishment, Carlos. It was designed for attention. Now we have theirs. At New York's JFK Airport Gate 32 erupted in confusion. Skyway Airlines Flight 443 to London, scheduled for immediate boarding, suddenly showed delayed compliance review on the departure board. "Ladies and gentlemen," the gate agent announced, confusion evident in her voice, "we're experiencing an unexpected compliance verification. Boarding will be delayed approximately 30 minutes. Passengers groaned. A businessman in a tailored suit approached the counter. "What does compliance verification mean? I have a connection to catch." The gate agent typed frantically, eyes widening at whatever appeared on her screen. "Sir, I don't have that information right now. We're waiting for instructions from headquarters." Similar scenes played out at 27 Skyway gates across 6 airports. Frontline employees received the same cryptic alert. AERO-Core black flag active. Boarding protocols suspended pending verification. At Frankfurt Airport, a Skyway station manager called operations control in a panic. "The system won't let us dispatch any flights. It keeps saying ethics compliance suspended." In Singapore, a Skyway regional director received an automated message from DBS Bank. "Notice ESG-linked credit facility suspended pending ethics compliance restoration. Access to committed funds temporarily restricted." At London Heathrow, the airport's compliance officer received an alert. "Skyway Airlines ethics status downgraded to non-humane-centric. Please implement contingency protocols for non-compliant carrier operations." The first financial impact hit precisely 7 minutes after Eleanor activated the Thompson Protocol. Banking algorithms designed to limit exposure to ethical risks automatically restricted access to a $250 million sustainability-linked credit facility that Skyway used for daily operations. 4 minutes later, Green Future Capital froze a $350 million ESG bond program mid-transaction. 3 minutes after that, Transatlantic Sustainable Investment Partners placed a hold on a $300 million fleet modernization loan. None of these actions required human approval. The AERO-Core integration with financial systems meant that an ethics compliance suspension automatically triggered protective measures, financial antibodies responding to a detected threat. At Skyway's operational center in Atlanta, warning lights cascaded across monitoring stations. Dispatchers watched in disbelief as system after system flagged restrictions. "What the hell is happening?" demanded Operations Director Frank Williams. "Someone get technical support on the line," a young systems analyst spoke up hesitantly. "Sir, this isn't a technical error. We're under an AERO-Core black flag restriction." "A what?" "An ethics compliance emergency suspension. I've never seen one before. According to the alert, we've been classified as non-humane-centric in our passenger treatment." Frank's face reddened. "That's ridiculous. Override it." "I can't, sir. It's locked at the highest level, and—" The analyst swallowed hard. "It's affecting our financial access. Treasury just called. Our operational credit lines are freezing." As this unfolded, Skyway Flight 219 carrying Zoe and Zoey Thompson was somewhere over the Atlantic. Its designation on the AERO-Core monitoring system had changed from a simple flight number to the epicenter of a compliance crisis that was spreading by the minute. On board, the captain received an unusual message. "Flight 219, be advised. Aircraft is subject to AERO-Core ethics review upon landing. Prepare for non-standard arrival procedure at alternate airport." In Brussels, Carlos handed Eleanor another update. 4 major airports have flagged Skyway for enhanced compliance monitoring. Singapore has suspended their landing slot allocations. Their stock is down 4% in pre-market trading. Eleanor nodded calmly. "And Flight 219. Being diverted to Shannon Airport in Ireland for ethics compliance review." "Good," Eleanor said. "That's where the twins will meet my representative." Carlos hesitated. Ms. Thompson, I've worked with you for 8 years, and I've never seen you activate an override protocol. May I ask what happens next? Eleanor looked up from her terminal. Next, Carlos, we see if Skyway Airlines believes in dignity or just in dollars. Richard Turner, CEO of Skyway Airlines, was having breakfast with potential investors when his phone began vibrating incessantly. Irritated by the interruption, he excused himself from the Manhattan restaurant and stepped outside. "This better be important," he snapped. Victoria Montgomery, chief legal officer, didn't bother with pleasantries. "Richard, we're in trouble. Major trouble. Where are you?" "Midtown." "What's happening?" "Get to headquarters, now. We're under an AERO-Core black flag restriction. Our ethics compliance rating has been suspended." Turner froze on the sidewalk. "That's impossible. We just passed our quarterly review with flying colors." "This isn't a review. It's an emergency override. We've been classified as non-humane-centric in our passenger treatment. We've lost access to nearly $1 billion in ESG funding. Airports are flagging our operations. Our stock is in freefall." "Who authorized this? Call the AERO-Core administrators and tell them—" Richard Victoria interrupted. "This came from the top, from Eleanor Thompson herself." The name meant nothing to him. "Who the hell is Eleanor Thompson?" Victoria's laugh was bitter. "The woman who designed the entire AERO-Core system, the architect of the ethics infrastructure that our ESG funding depends on, and apparently she's invoked something called the Thompson Protocol against us." "Why would she target us specifically?" "I don't know yet, but she has level 5 override authority. She can basically shut down our access to sustainable financing with a keystroke." 20 minutes later, Turner stormed into Skyway's executive floor, where crisis mode was already in full swing. In the main conference room, executives huddled around displays showing cascading alerts and plummeting stock values. "Talk to me," Turner demanded. Victoria pointed to the main screen. "AERO-Core black flag activated 43 minutes ago. Immediate consequences: $900 million in ESG financing frozen. 4 major airports have downgraded our operational status. We've had to divert 6 international flights to alternate airports for ethics compliance verification, whatever that means." "On what grounds? What triggered this?" Victoria hesitated. "A passenger dignity violation report, specifically Flight 219 from JFK to Paris." "What violation?" "The removal of 2 passengers from first-class 13-year-old twin girls. They had valid tickets. They were reassigned to economy without cause." Turner waved dismissively. "That happens all the time. Cabin crew make seating adjustments constantly." "These weren't just any passengers, Richard. They're Eleanor Thompson's granddaughters." The room fell silent. "Are you telling me," Turner said slowly, "that we're losing millions of dollars per minute because a flight attendant ruffled some VIP's feathers?" "It's worse than that," said Scott Davis, head of compliance. "We specifically signed into the AERO-Core ecosystem 5 years ago as a condition for accessing ESG-based funding. The Thompson Protocol was embedded in that agreement." "What Thompson Protocol? I never signed anything with that name." Scott pulled up a document on the main screen, a dense legal agreement with a highlighted section. "Signatory carrier acknowledges that AERO-Core's founding protocols include emergency ethics override provisions, including but not limited to the Thompson Protocol Directive 5A, which may be activated in cases of severe ethics violations, particularly those involving dignity violations against vulnerable passengers." Turner stared at it. "When did I sign this?" "When we renewed with First Green Capital last year," Victoria said quietly. "It was in the standard AERO-Core compliance package. We all signed off on it, the entire executive team. And nobody thought to flag a clause that gives some ethics consultant the power to freeze our credit lines." Scott looked uncomfortable. "Sir Eleanor Thompson isn't just some ethics consultant. She literally built the ethics infrastructure that the entire sustainable aviation financing model depends on. Her AERO-Core system is used by 80% of global carriers. Without it, we'd lose access to about 40% of available capital financing. Turner sank into a chair, the magnitude of the situation finally hitting him. So, what you're telling me is that we've inadvertently made an enemy of the one person who can essentially shut down our operation without firing a single employee. Victoria nodded grimly. And judging by the escalation speed of these restrictions, she's just getting started. Get me everything on Eleanor Thompson, Turner ordered. And find out exactly what happened on Flight 219. I want to know who removed those girls from first class and why. And somebody get our PR team in here. We need to get ahead of this before... An assistant rushed in, looking pale. Sir, it's too late. It's already hitting the media. She turned up the volume on the wall-mounted television where a financial news anchor was saying, Unprecedented ethics compliance suspension. Skyway Airline stock has fallen 8% on the news that $900 million in ESG-linked financing has been frozen after a black flag designation from the AERO-Core ethics system. The trigger appears to be a passenger incident involving minors. We're still gathering details, but sources indicate this may be the first activation of the legendary Thompson Protocol, a fail-safe mechanism designed by AERO-Core architect Eleanor Thompson. Turner stared at the screen, then back at his executive team. Find out what happened on that flight. He repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. And somebody tell me how the hell we fix this. As Skyway's executives scrambled to understand what had hit them, Eleanor Thompson was methodically implementing the next phase of her response. The Thompson Protocol wasn't merely a punishment. It was a structured escalation designed to create a pathway for accountability and reform. In her Brussels office, Eleanor convened a virtual meeting with key allies individuals strategically positioned throughout the aviation ethics ecosystem. Dr. Amara Okafor's face appeared first on the secure conference screen. As chair of the ESG Emergency Review Board, she had significant influence over how financial institutions responded to ethics alerts. Eleanor, you've set off quite the earthquake, Amara said. I've had calls from 3 major investment firms already. Good. They should be paying attention, Eleanor replied. Has Skyway attempted to contact you? Not yet, but they will. What exactly are you hoping to achieve here? Eleanor's gaze was steady. Not hoping, Amara. Requiring. First, acknowledgement of the specific violation against my granddaughters. Second, transparent disclosure of any pattern of similar incidents. Third, structural reform of their passenger dignity protocols. The second face appeared on screen. Martin Diaz, former FAA ethics director and current International Air Transport Association consultant. Eleanor, with all due respect, using the black flag override for a personal matter involving your family. This is not personal, Martin, Eleanor interrupted, her voice calm but firm. My granddaughters were subjected to the same treatment that countless other passengers face daily. The difference is that they happen to be related to someone who can do something about it. She pulled up a document on her screen and shared it with the group. This is a compilation of passenger dignity complaints filed against Skyway Airlines over the past 3 years. 87% of complaints by Black, Hispanic, and Asian passengers were classified as unverifiable and never escalated for review. Martin's expression changed as he scanned the data. Where did you get this? From the AERO-Core pattern recognition algorithm. Level 5 access allows me to see what individual airlines can't or won't acknowledge their own ingrained patterns of selective treatment. The third face appeared Layla Farhadi, director of the Global Aviation Ethics Initiative. Eleanor, I support what you're doing, but the financial impacts are already spreading beyond Skyway. 2 other airlines have had minor ESG restriction alerts triggered because of their operational ties to Skyway. That's by design, Layla. The aviation industry functions as an interconnected ecosystem. When one carrier commits a serious ethics violation, others should question their associations. Eleanor opened another document, this one labeled Thompson Protocol Phase 2. I'm implementing a graduated response. The initial black flag was automatic triggered by the specific violation on Flight 219. Phase 2 will depend on Skyway's response in the next 12 hours. And she shared the document revealing a detailed flowchart of potential escalation and de-escalation pathways. If they acknowledge the violation, identify the responsible parties, and commit to structural reform, we begin a supervised restoration process. If they deny, deflect, or attempt to minimize the restrictions, intensify and expand to their operational partners. Carlos entered with a tablet. Ms. Thompson, Skyway CEO Richard Turner is attempting to reach you. His office has called 3 times in the past 10 minutes. Eleanor nodded. Tell him I'll return his call after this meeting. Turning back to the screen, she continued. Each of you represents a critical checkpoint in this process. Amara, you'll review their financial compliance restoration plan. Martin, you'll evaluate their operational reforms. Layla, you'll monitor their public accountability measures. And if they fight back? Martin asked. They already are, Eleanor replied. Their legal team is undoubtedly preparing a challenge to the black flag designation as we speak. They'll claim it's disproportionate, possibly retaliatory due to my family connection. Is it? Layla asked quietly. Eleanor's expression didn't change. My granddaughters were humiliated because of the color of their skin. If protecting them from discrimination means leveraging every tool at my disposal, I make no apologies for that. But this isn't about vengeance, it's about visibility. For decades, these incidents have remained invisible because the victims lacked power. Today, that changes. After the call ended, Carlos returned. Ms. Thompson, your daughter Diana has called twice, and the PR team is asking how to respond to media inquiries. Tell Diana I'll call her shortly. As for the media, we say nothing. The Thompson Protocol speaks for itself. And CEO Turner's call. Eleanor checked her watch. I'll call him in exactly 1 hour. Let him feel the weight of waiting. Sometimes, Carlos, the most powerful message is silence. As Carlos left, Eleanor opened her desk drawer and removed a small leather-bound journal, James's notebook where he had first sketched the Thompson Protocol concept 15 years ago. Inside the cover, he had written a note to her. Some will call this overreach. Others will call it justice. But we know what it really is, a recalibration of power. Remember, Ellie, systems don't change because we ask nicely. They change because the cost of remaining the same becomes too high to bear. Eleanor traced her fingers over his handwriting. The cost just went up, James, she whispered. Let's see if they're ready to pay. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. The standard mid-flight announcement woke Zoe from her uneasy sleep. Beside her, Zoe had been staring at the ceiling for hours, unable to rest. We've been advised by air traffic control of an ethics compliance alert affecting our operational rating. We will be diverting to Shannon Airport in Ireland for further instructions. Our estimated arrival time is now 4:25 p.m. local time. We apologize for any inconvenience. A confused murmur rippled through the cabin. Ethics compliance, Zoe whispered. What does that mean? Zoe sat upright. I don't know, but something's happening. Around them, passengers pulled out phones, searching for signals. A businessman 2 rows ahead managed to connect to the in-flight Wi-Fi, and his exclamation drew attention. Holy Skyway's stock is crashing. Some kind of ethics violation flag. More passengers connected, the buzz of conversation growing louder with each new piece of information discovered. It says here all their ESG funding is frozen. $900 million just locked down. Something about passenger treatment. Zoe and Zoe exchanged glances. You think this is because of us? Zoe whispered. No way, Zoe replied. How could it be? A flight attendant, not Jackson, passed through the cabin, visibly tense as passengers peppered her with questions she couldn't answer. Ma'am, why are we being diverted? Is the airline in trouble? What's an ethics compliance alert? Her rehearsed response, we'll have more information upon landing, did little to calm the growing anxiety. When she reached row 34, she paused, glancing at the twins with an unreadable expression before moving on quickly. Zoe pulled up the in-flight map on her screen. We're nowhere near Paris now. Ireland is completely out of the way. Do you think Grandma Eleanor knows about the diversion? Zoe asked. Zoe's eyes widened suddenly. Zoe, what if Grandma is behind this? Behind what? This ethics thing. She works with airlines, right? What if she found out what happened to us and did something? The idea seemed far-fetched, yet not entirely impossible. Their grandmother had always been vague about the specifics of her work, describing it only as helping airlines remember their humanity. The cabin lights dimmed as the plane began its descent. Through the window, Zoe could see the green coastline of Ireland appearing through clouds. This was not how they had imagined their triumphant arrival in Europe, diverted to a different country, sitting in cramped economy seats, the subject of a humiliation they still couldn't fully process. As the plane touched down at Shannon Airport, the captain's voice came over the intercom again. Ladies and gentlemen, we have landed at Shannon Airport. Please remain seated. We've been instructed to follow special deplaning procedures. A representative from the International Aviation Ethics Board will be boarding to speak with the crew. We appreciate your patience. The passengers exchanged confused glances. This was clearly not a routine diversion. 20 minutes later, the main cabin door opened. Instead of passengers deplaning two individuals in formal attire, boarded a man and a woman, both carrying tablets and official-looking badges. They spoke briefly with the head flight attendant, who pointed toward first class. The woman nodded and made her way through the cabin while the man remained at the front speaking with the flight crew. As the woman passed row 34, she slowed, making deliberate eye contact with Zoe and Zoey. Zoe and Zoey Thompson, she asked quietly. The twins nodded, surprised. My name is Sophia Winters, International Aviation Ethics Board. When we deplane, please remain seated until everyone else has exited. Someone will escort you to a private waiting area. Zoe found her voice. Are we in trouble? Ms. Winters' expression softened. No, but Skyway Airlines certainly is. While the twins waited in the private lounge at Shannon Airport, the story was already spreading across global media platforms. What had begun as a financial news item about Skyway Airlines' ethics compliance suspension quickly evolved as details emerged. Financial Times. Skyway Airlines faces unprecedented ethics sanction. 900 Maller frozen. CNN Business. Aviation ethics bombshell black flag. Designation grounds. Skyway operations. Aviation Weekly. Thompson Protocol activated for first time. Industry in shock. The Guardian. Reports black twin girls removed from first class triggered aviation ethics crisis. In the Shannon Airport VIP lounge, Sophia Winters had provided the twins with refreshments and access to a secure Wi-Fi network. Zoe immediately searched for news about their situation, her eyes widening as she scrolled through headlines. Zoe, look at this, she whispered, showing her sister the screen. We're trending. Zoe leaned over, scanning the articles with growing disbelief. This is about us. But how did anyone even know? Grandma, Zoe said with certainty. She must have, reported it or something. Sophia returned with a tablet. Girls, I need to confirm some details about what happened on the flight. Is it okay if I record your statement? Over the next 30 minutes, the twins recounted every detail, Jackson Reynolds tearing their tickets, the silence of the other passengers, their relocation to economy. Sophia took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Has anything like this ever happened to you before? She asked. The twins exchanged glances. Not exactly like this, Zoe said carefully. But we've been followed in stores. Had teachers assume we were in the wrong advanced class. Our mom calls them daily paper cuts, Zoe added. Small enough that complaining sounds petty, but they add up. Sophia nodded grimly. What you experienced wasn't a paper cut.
It was a full violation of passenger dignity protocols.
Under the AERO-Core ethics framework, discriminatory treatment based on perceived identity is classified as a Level 1 violation. The fact that you're minors elevates it further. She hesitated, then added, "Your grandmother Eleanor is a legend in aviation ethics circles. She designed the system that's currently holding Skyway accountable." "Is that why this is such a big deal?" Zoe asked. "No," Sophia replied firmly. "It's a big deal because it should be. What happened to you happens to passengers every day. The difference is that most don't have someone like your grandmother to make the system work as intended." Meanwhile, across social media, the twins' story was spreading rapidly, though not always accurately, at Aviation News. Breaking Skyway, Airlines lost $900 in funding after flight attendant removed black children from first class #Thompson twins at travel rights. Eleanor Thompson activates nuclear option against Skyway after her granddaughters were racially profiled #Justice for Thompson twins at Skeptic Travel. Story seems suspicious. 2 kids get moved from first class and an entire airline gets punished. There must be more to this. #wait for facts. At Skyway Official. We are aware of the AERO-Core compliance alert and are working to address the situation. The comfort and dignity of all our passengers remains our highest priority.
In the private lounge, Zoe was scrolling through comments on a news article. Her expression darkened. "People are saying we're lying," she said, "that we made it up for attention. Don't read the comments." Sophia advised, but it was too late.
"Why would an airline deliberately target 2 random kids?" Zoe read aloud. "Sounds like entitled brats whose grandma has connections."
"How can they say that they weren't even there?" Zoe placed a hand on her sister's arm. "Zoe, it doesn't matter what they think. We know what happened." Sophia's phone buzzed. After reading the message, she looked up at the twins. "Your grandmother has arranged for you to continue to Paris on a different airline. A car will take you to your hotel where she'll meet you tomorrow morning." "What about our performance?" Zoe asked, suddenly remembering the competition that had started this journey. "It's been rescheduled for the day after tomorrow. The conservatory was very understanding." As they gathered their belongings to leave, Sophia added, "Just so you know, there will likely be media at the Paris airport. Your grandmother has arranged security, but be prepared for attention." Zoe looked at her sister, then back at Sophia. "Can I ask you something? Is what's happening to Skyway? Is it fair? I mean, we just wanted to sit in our seats." Sophia considered the question carefully. "What's happening to Skyway isn't punishment. It's accountability. There's a difference." She paused. "Your grandmother has spent her career building systems that make fairness possible. Today you're seeing one of those systems actually work." Dusk was falling over Paris when the twins' plane touched down at Charles de Gaulle Airport. The light was golden, casting long shadows across the tarmac as they deplaned not through the usual passenger bridge, but via a private staircase to the runway where a sleek black car waited. A woman in a dark suit approached as they reached the bottom step. "Zoe and Zoey Thompson. I'm Marie Laurent's security consultant for your grandmother. Please follow me." The twins exchanged glances. This wasn't the Paris arrival they had imagined. No excited exploration of the terminal, no stopping to buy macarons from the famous patisserie kiosk, no practicing their French with passport control. Instead, they were being whisked away like visiting dignitaries. Through the car's tinted windows, they caught glimpses of the terminal's exterior. Near one entrance, a small cluster of people with cameras waited, scanning arriving passengers. "Are those reporters?" Zoe asked. Marie nodded. "Your story has gained significant attention. Your grandmother thought you might prefer to avoid them for now." The car glided through Paris traffic, the Eiffel Tower appearing briefly between buildings before vanishing again.
Under different circumstances, the twins would have pressed their faces to the windows, pointing out landmarks they'd researched. Now they sat in silence, processing the surreal turn their trip had taken. Their hotel wasn't the modest 3-star accommodation originally booked for competition participants. Instead, the car pulled up to a discreet entrance of Le Bristol, one of Paris's most exclusive hotels. A manager greeted them by name, escorting them directly to a private elevator. "Your grandmother has arranged everything," he explained in lightly accented English. "She will join you tomorrow morning. For tonight, room service is at your disposal." The suite was elegant, but understated 2 bedrooms connected to a shared sitting room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a courtyard garden. On the dining table, a handwritten note waited beside a basket of fresh fruit. "Zoe and Zoey rest tonight. We'll talk in the morning. You're safe here and you've done nothing wrong. Sometimes the world needs a reminder that dignity isn't a luxury amenity, it's a fundamental right. I'm sorry your journey was disrupted, but proud of how you've handled yourselves. With love, Grandma Eleanor." Zoe read the note twice, then passed it to her sister. "This is weird, right?" Zoe said, dropping onto the plush sofa. 24 hours ago, we were just 2 kids going to a music competition. Now we're, the center of some international incident. Zoe walked to the window, looking out at the Paris evening. "I just want to practice for our performance. Do you think they have a piano here?" Zoe wondered, momentarily distracted by the possibility. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. A hotel staff member wheeled in a cart with covered dishes. "Compliments of the management," he explained. "And Ms. Thompson asked me to inform you that there is indeed a practice piano available in the private salon whenever you wish to use it." After he left, Zoe uncovered the dishes' delicate French cuisine that would normally have excited them, but their appetites had vanished. "I checked social media again," Zoe said, picking at her food. "People are calling us the Thompson twins like we're characters in a story. There are hashtags. #Justice for Thompson twins. #FlyWhileBlack. Mom must be freaking out," Zoe said suddenly. "Have you texted her?" They both reached for their phones, finding several missed calls and messages from their mother. Before they could respond, Zoe's phone rang, Diana Thompson calling. "Mom." Zoe put the call on speaker. "We're okay. We're in Paris now." "Girls." Diana's voice was tight with emotion. "I've been so worried. The news is everywhere. Are you really all right?" "We're fine," Zoe assured her. "Just confused. Did you know what Grandma was going to do?" Diana sighed. "No one knows what your grandmother is going to do until she does it. But I'm not surprised. Eleanor Thompson doesn't make threats, she builds systems. And apparently she built one specifically for situations like this. Is Skyway Airlines really in trouble because of us?" Zoe asked. "No, sweetheart. They're in trouble because of them. Your grandmother just made sure they couldn't hide it this time." After reassuring their mother and promising to call again tomorrow, the twins tried to settle in. Zoe unpacked their competition clothes, checking for wrinkles. Zoe scrolled through more news articles, unable to stop herself. "Listen to this," she said. "The Thompson Protocol, never before activated, was designed as a fail-safe mechanism to enforce passenger dignity standards when conventional complaints processes fail. Aviation ethics experts have called it the industry's glass break in case of emergency option." Zoe paused her unpacking. "Do you think Jackson Reynolds knows what he started?" "I hope so," Zoe replied, her voice hardening. "I hope he knows exactly what he did." Later that night, as Zoe was drifting to sleep, Zoe's voice came from the darkness of the other bed. "Zoe, do you think this would have happened if we weren't Eleanor Thompson's granddaughters?" Zoe considered the question. "No," she finally answered. "And that's the problem, isn't it? The Palais Garnier, home of the Paris Opera and venue for the International Youth Music Conservatory competition, loomed grand and imposing. Golden statues and intricate carvings adorned its facade, intimidating under normal circumstances. Today it felt overwhelming. 2 days after their arrival in Paris, the Thompson twins stood at the artist's entrance flanked by their grandmother's security consultant, Marie. News of their story had spread through the competition, transforming them from ordinary participants into reluctant celebrities. "Remember," Marie said quietly, "you don't have to speak to anyone about what happened if you don't want to." Zoe nodded, clutching her sheet music. Zoe adjusted her saxophone case-strap eyes, scanning the small crowd of journalists lingering nearby. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Other young musicians stared as they passed conversations, halting mid-sentence. A competition coordinator rushed to greet them. Zoe, we're so glad you made it. Your practice rooms are ready whenever you need them." The twins had barely slept the night before. After meeting with their grandmother that morning, a conversation that had illuminated the magnitude of what was unfolding, they had tried to refocus on the competition. But concentration proved elusive. In the private practice room, Zoe sat at the Steinway grand piano, hands hovering over the keys. The familiar routine of scales and warm-ups should have been calming, but her fingers felt stiff, unresponsive. "I can't focus," she admitted when Zoe entered. "Everyone's watching us for the wrong reasons." Zoe placed her saxophone on a nearby chair. "Then let's give them the right reasons. Let's play so well they forget everything else." It was easier said than done. During their scheduled rehearsal time on the main stage, Zoe missed notes she hadn't missed in months. Zoe's timing faltered twice. The acoustics of the grand hall seemed to amplify every error. "This is a disaster," Zoe whispered as they left the stage. "We're not ready." In the green room, other competitors watched them with a mixture of curiosity and sympathy. A young violinist from Germany approached cautiously. "I read about what happened to you," she said. "It was wrong. My teacher says your grandmother is making history." Before the twins could respond, a competition official appeared. 5 minutes until the Thompson performance." The reality of the moment crashed over them. This wasn't just another competition now. It was their first public appearance since becoming the Thompson twins of international news. "I can't do this," Zoe said, panic rising. "Everyone's going to be judging us for things that have nothing to do with music." Zoe took her sister's hands. "Do you remember what Mom always says before our recitals?" Zoe nodded. "The music speaks when words fail." "Exactly. So let's stop talking and start playing." When they walked onto the stage, the auditorium was fuller than expected for an afternoon youth competition slot. Journalists lined the back wall. Competition judges sat straight-backed in the front row. And somewhere in the middle, Eleanor Thompson watched quietly. Her presence felt rather than announced. Zoe took her place at the piano. Zoe stood beside her with her saxophone. For their joint performance piece, they had chosen a challenging arrangement that blended classical structure with jazz improvisation, Zoe providing the foundation, Zoe building the conversation above it. The hall fell silent. Zoe took a deep breath, placed her fingers on the keys, and began. The first notes were tentative, slightly rushed, but as the familiar melody flowed through her fingers, something shifted. The world outside the stage, the news stories, the social media debates, even the airline incident receded. There was only the music, the conversation between piano and saxophone, between sister and sister. Zoe's saxophone entry was perfect, a warm, confident sound that wrapped around Zoe's piano line. They locked eyes briefly, a silent communication passing between them. Then Zoe closed her eyes, letting the music take over. For 6 minutes and 23 seconds, they weren't symbols in a larger controversy. They were simply musicians, speaking through their instruments with all the emotion and discipline they had cultivated over years of practice. When the final note faded, there was a moment of complete silence. Then applause erupted, first from the judges, then spreading throughout the hall. It wasn't polite, obligatory applause. It was genuine recognition, As they took their bow, Zoe caught sight of their grandmother in the audience. Eleanor Thompson wasn't clapping. She was sitting perfectly still, one hand pressed against her heart, eyes glistening with unshed tears. Later in the backstage area, the competition director approached with an envelope. "The judges have made their decision early," he said, handing it to them. "Extraordinary circumstances call for extraordinary measures." Inside was a formal invitation to perform at the competition's gala final concert, an honor usually reserved for the top 3 scorers after all rounds were complete. "But we've only performed once," Zoe protested. "The other rounds, the judges feel your performance today was definitive," the director explained. "Sometimes music transcends competition frameworks." As word spread of their advancement, reactions from other competitors were mixed. Most offered congratulations, but a few exchanged skeptical glances. "Do you think they advanced us because of our performance or because of the news?" Zoe asked Zoe as they packed up their instruments. "Does it matter?" Zoe replied. "We played our best when it was hardest to do so. That counts for something." Walking out of the Palais Garnier that evening, they were surprised to find a small group of young music students waiting with programs to sign. "You were amazing," one girl said shyly. "The way you played together, like you were telling a story without words." Zoe smiled for the first time that day. "We were." The brief respite provided by their musical success didn't last long. The morning after their performance, as the twins ate breakfast in their hotel suite, Zoe's phone buzzed with a news alert. Her expression darkened as she read the screen. "What is it?" Zoe asked, mouthful of croissant. "Someone leaked video from the boarding gate at JFK," Zoe said quietly. "They're saying it contradicts our story." Zoe grabbed her sister's phone. The headline read, "New footage raises questions about Thompson twins' account." Below it was a grainy security camera image showing the twins walking toward first class smiling. The caption read, "Were the Thompson twins really removed from first class, or is this a case of privileged teenagers gaming the system?" "That's from when we first boarded," Zoe exclaimed. "Before Jackson tore our tickets, they cut out everything that happened next." Zoe took her phone back, scrolling through the article. It says, "Sources close to the situation suggest the twins may have attempted to upgrade themselves without proper tickets, prompting standard procedure from Skyway staff." "That's a lie." Zoe slammed her hand on the table. "They're making it sound like we tried to sneak into first class." A knock at the door interrupted them. Eleanor Thompson entered, already dressed in her characteristic formal attire despite the early hour. "I see you've found this morning's development," she said, gesturing to the phones. "I expected something like this." "Grandma, they're saying we lied," Zoe said. "That video doesn't show what actually happened." Eleanor sat down at the table, her posture perfect as always. "Of course it doesn't. It's been selectively edited to show you approaching first class without showing what happened next. It's a classic deflection tactic attack the victim's credibility." "But why would they do that?" Zoe demanded. "We didn't do anything wrong." "Because my dear Skyway Airlines is losing millions of dollars by the hour. Their stock has fallen 12% since the Black Flag designation. They're desperate to change the narrative." Eleanor poured herself a cup of tea from the service on the table. "This is how power responds when challenged: first denial, then deflection, then attack. I've seen it play out dozens of times." "So what do we do?" Zoe asked. "Nothing," Eleanor replied calmly. "We don't engage with their narrative. The Thompson Protocol is designed to work regardless of public opinion. But as the day progressed, the attacks intensified. Social media filled with debate about the twins' story at Travel Truth. Convenient how these poor victims happen to be related to the woman who controls airline funding hatchet entitlement culture, at Skyway Supporter. So 2 kids don't get to sit in first class and an entire airline gets punished. Make it make sense.
#Thompson privilege, @newsanalyst. The edited footage from Skyway raises serious questions about the Thompson account. Where's the full video? Show the evidence. By afternoon, several prominent travel bloggers had picked up the story, questioning whether the AERO-Core response was proportionate. One called it the most expensive temper tantrum in aviation history. The twins, trying to practice for their gala performance, found concentration impossible. The supportive messages that had flooded in days earlier were now mixed with accusations and skepticism. "They're calling us liars," Zoe said, reading comments on her phone despite Eleanor's advice to avoid social media. "Someone just wrote that we played the race card to get special treatment." Zoe, who had been quieter throughout the backlash, suddenly looked up from her piano. "This is what he wanted," she said. "What who? Jackson Reynolds. When he tore our tickets, he was sending a message, 'Your experience doesn't matter. Your truth doesn't matter. No one will believe you anyway.'" Zoe stared at her sister. "So what do we do?" "What Grandma said. We don't engage with their lies. We know what happened." But the pressure continued to build. That evening, a prominent news channel ran a segment titled Thompson Protocol Justice or Overreach, featuring aviation experts debating whether Eleanor Thompson had abused her position to punish Skyway over a seating misunderstanding. In their hotel suite, the twins watched in disbelief as a Skyway spokesperson claimed that Jackson Reynolds had merely attempted to verify the twins' tickets after noticing an anomaly in the booking system. "That's not what happened," Zoe shouted at the screen. "He tore our tickets. He never even asked our names." Zoe remained silent, her expression hardening as the segment continued. Eleanor, watching from an armchair, finally spoke. "This is exactly why I built the Thompson Protocol," she said quietly. "Because without it, this would be the end of the story. Their denial against your truth. Their power against your word." "But people believe them," Zoe said, frustrated tears forming. "They're making us look like entitled brats." "Some people will believe them," Eleanor agreed. "But the Thompson Protocol doesn't require public consensus to work. It requires accountability mechanisms that function regardless of who controls the narrative." She turned off the television and faced her granddaughters. "Tomorrow, Skyway Airlines will discover that attacking your credibility won't restore their financial access, and then they'll have to make a choice, double down on their denial or begin the real work of accountability." That night, Zoe lay awake, unable to sleep despite exhaustion. From the other bed, she heard Zoe's voice in the darkness. "Zoe, are you awake?" "Yeah." "Do you think it was worth it? All of this?" Zoe thought for a long moment before answering. "I don't know yet, but I keep thinking about all the people who don't have a grandmother like ours, who gets removed from their seats and just has to take it because no one believes them." "Yeah," Zoe whispered. "Me too." The executive floor of Skyway Airlines headquarters had transformed into a war room. Workstations were abandoned in favor of the main conference area where teams of legal, financial, and public relations specialists worked around the clock. Digital displays tracked the company's plummeting stock price and cascading operational restrictions. CEO Richard Turner hadn't left the building in 36 hours. Unshaven and irritable, he paced the length of the conference table where his core crisis team was assembled. "Update," he demanded, voice hoarse from overuse. Victoria Montgomery, Chief Legal Officer, spoke first. "The AERO-Core Black Flag designation remains in effect. Our challenge to the Ethics Review Board was rejected on procedural grounds. They're insisting we address the specific incident before any review of the designation can occur." "What specific incident?" Turner exploded. "A flight attendant reseated 2 passengers that happens thousands of times a day across the industry." Scott Davis, head of compliance, cleared his throat. "Sir, we've identified the flight attendant in question, Jackson Reynolds.
According to his statement, he observed 2 unaccompanied minors attempting to sit in first class and believed there was a booking error. He claims he asked for verification, and when they couldn't provide it, he reseated them in economy. And, Turner prompted. Scott shifted uncomfortably. There are discrepancies between his account and the twins' statement. They claim he tore their tickets without verification and made comments implying they didn't belong in first class. Where's the proof? It's their word against his. Actually, Victoria interjected, we do have security camera footage from the boarding area showing the twins approaching first class. We've released that to media outlets to counter their narrative. Good, Turner nodded. What about this Eleanor Thompson? Have we made contact? Melissa Rivera, PR director, shook her head. Her office is deflecting our calls, but we've started a counter-narrative questioning the proportionality of her response and suggesting possible abuse of position. Is it working? Melissa grimaced. Partially. We've got some sympathetic coverage questioning whether the punishment fits the crime, but it's not translating to any easing of the financial restrictions. That's because the Thompson Protocol bypasses public opinion, Scott explained. It operates directly through financial and regulatory mechanisms. Turner slammed his hand on the table. So we're bleeding millions because one woman has her finger on the kill switch. There has to be a way around this. Victoria cleared her throat. There is one path forward outlined in the AERO-Core documentation. We can submit to a full ethics audit, acknowledge any verified violations, implement required reforms, and apply for provisional restoration of our compliance rating. An audit? Turner scoffed. That could take months. We'll be bankrupt by then. Not necessarily, Scott countered. There's an expedited process for single-incident triggers like this one, but it would require, he hesitated, require what? A formal acknowledgement of the incident disciplinary action for involved personnel and a comprehensive remediation plan. So we throw Reynolds under the bus, Turner concluded. It's more complex than that, Victoria cautioned. The Thompson Protocol specifically requires acknowledging any pattern of similar incidents, not just the triggering event. A tense silence fell over the room. What pattern? Turner asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Scott opened a folder on his tablet. I've been reviewing our passenger complaint database. In the past 3 years, we've had 347 complaints categorized as passenger dignity concerns. 87% of complaints from passengers of color were classified as unverifiable and closed without action. For white passengers, that figure is 43%. Jesus Christ, Turner muttered. There's more, Scott continued reluctantly. I've identified 12 incidents with striking similarities to the Thompson case passengers of color questioned about their seating assignments in premium cabins despite having valid tickets. All were classified as routine seating verification and dismissed. Turner sank into his chair, the full weight of the situation finally hitting him. So what you're telling me is that we don't just have a rogue flight attendant problem. We have a pattern that Eleanor Thompson somehow detected. The AERO-Core system has pattern recognition algorithms specifically designed to identify these trends, Scott confirmed. With Level 5 access, she would have seen what our internal systems obscured through classification bias. Turner stared at the stock ticker on the wall display, watching as Skyway shares fell another percentage point in real time. Options, he demanded. I need options now. Melissa leaned forward. We can continue challenging the Thompson twins' account. We've already got media questioning their story. If we push harder... That won't work, Victoria interrupted. The financial mechanisms won't respond to public opinion shifts. They're tied directly to AERO-Core compliance restoration. So we're back to the audit and acknowledgement, Turner concluded. There is one other option, Victoria said carefully.
We can file a legal challenge against Eleanor Thompson personally alleging abuse of position and conflict of interest in activating the black flag designation in a case involving her family members. Now we're talking, Turner said, straightening. Can we win? Victoria's expression was grim. Unlikely. The Thompson Protocol explicitly includes provisions for dignity violations against vulnerable passengers, including minors, and she recused herself from the verification process, which is being handled by the Independent Ethics Review Board. So it's a PR move, not a legal solution, Turner realized. Essentially, it might generate sympathy for our position, but it won't restore our financing or operational status. Turner stood again, walking to the window overlooking the Atlanta skyline. For several long moments, he said nothing. Sir, Scott finally prompted. We need to make a decision. We're losing approximately $2.7 million per hour in operational constraints and market value. Turner turned back to the room. File the legal challenge against Thompson, but simultaneously prepare for the expedited audit. We'll play both angles, public sympathy and procedural compliance. And Jackson Reynolds? Victoria asked. Turner's expression hardened. Suspend him pending investigation. Make it clear to the press that we take these allegations seriously and are conducting a thorough review. Melissa made a note. Should we reach out directly to the Thompson twins? Offer compensation? No, Victoria said firmly. Any direct contact could be construed as intimidation of minors. All communication needs to go through proper channels, their legal representation, or through the AERO-Core mediation process. Scott checked his tablet as a new alert appeared. Sir, we have another problem. The edited security footage we released is backfiring. Social media analysts are questioning why we didn't release the complete video showing what happened after the twins approached first class. Because we don't have it, Turner snapped. The camera angle changes. Scott looked uncomfortable. Actually, sir, we do have it. I've just received the full footage from standard developments in the Thompson Framework's expansion. The passenger dignity standards pioneered in aviation were now being adapted for rail systems, cruise lines, and other transportation sectors, creating a comprehensive dignity infrastructure that transcended individual companies or industries. Your experience catalyzed something far larger than any of us anticipated, she told her granddaughters. The Thompson Protocol was designed for aviation, but the principles apply wherever dignity depends on systemic rather than individual accountability. Zoe considered this. So our terrible flight ended up changing things for people who will never even fly. That's how systemic change works, Eleanor explained. It starts with specific incidents that reveal structural problems. But once the solutions are demonstrated in one context, they can be adapted for many others. The following day at the anniversary celebration held in the grand ballroom of the International Civil Aviation Organization's Paris office, the twins sat beside their grandmother as dignitaries from around the world commemorated the Thompson Framework's first year of implementation. The ICAO Director General's remarks captured the significance of the transformation. The Thompson Framework has redefined our understanding of what constitutes essential operational standards. Passenger dignity is no longer considered an amenity or a customer service goal. It is recognized as a fundamental operational requirement as essential as safety protocols or maintenance standards. Eleanor was invited to deliver the keynote address, a role she had initially hesitated to accept, concerned about centering herself in a transformation that transcended individual contributions. But the twins had encouraged her to speak, recognizing that the technical infrastructure she had built deserved acknowledgement alongside the catalyst their experience had provided. The Thompson Protocol was designed as a fail-safe, a last resort, when conventional accountability mechanisms proved insufficient, Eleanor explained to the assembled delegates. The fact that it needed to be activated reflects how deeply embedded certain patterns had become in our operational culture, but its effectiveness demonstrates that systemic change is possible when accountability is properly designed and implemented. She concluded with words that encapsulated the journey from individual incident to institutional transformation. 15 months ago, 2 young musicians were told they didn't belong in seats they had rightfully earned. Today, because of systems built long before that incident and activated because of it, millions of passengers travel with dignity standards that function regardless of who is watching or who is flying. That is the true legacy of the Thompson effect, not just justice for one incident, but transformation of the systems that allowed it to happen. As the conference concluded, Zoe reflected on their extraordinary journey. From the humiliation of torn tickets to international aviation standards bearing their family name, a path neither she nor her sister could have imagined that day at JFK. "Did you ever think all this would happen?" she asked Zoe as they prepared to return to their hotel. "When Jackson Reynolds tore our tickets." Zoe shook her head. "I just wanted to sit in our seats and go to our competition. I had no idea Grandma Eleanor had built this whole system just waiting to be triggered." "That's the real lesson," Zoe observed. "Dignity doesn't defend itself. Someone has to build systems that make it enforceable." Later that evening, as they walked along the Seine, their grandmother shared one final reflection on their journey. "You know," Eleanor said, "I spent 30 years building the AERO-Core system and the Thompson Protocol. I faced skepticism, dismissal, and outright resistance every step of the way. There were many times I questioned whether it was worth the effort." She paused, watching the lights of the city reflect on the water's surface. "But seeing what's happened in the 15 months since that system was finally activated, watching real transformation spread across an entire industry and beyond, I know now that it was. Not just for you, though. That would have been enough, but for every passenger, who will never know they're being treated with dignity because of systems rather than sympathy." The twins nodded, understanding the deeper meaning of their experience. What had begun as a personal humiliation had catalyzed institutional transformation precisely because their grandmother had built accountability mechanisms capable of translating individual incidents into systemic change. As they continued their walk, Zoe thought about their return flight scheduled for the following week. It would be remarkably unremarkable, 2 talented young musicians boarding a plane, taking their assigned seats, and being treated like any other passengers. And that perhaps was the greatest victory of all, the simple dignity of belonging everywhere they had earned the right to be without having to justify or defend that belonging. The Thompson effect had come full circle, transforming not just an industry, but the very passengers who had triggered it, teaching 2 young musicians that dignity didn't have to shout to be powerful, that systems mattered more than symbols, and that the quietest voices could create the loudest change when amplified by accountability designed to hear them. Have you ever wondered what happens when dignity meets design, when systems are built to protect those who've earned their place? This story shows that true change isn't always about fighting in the moment. Sometimes it's about creating frameworks that make accountability inevitable. If you found this story meaningful, please take a moment to subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that their voice matters, especially when others try to silence it. Remember, dignity isn't a luxury amenity. It's a fundamental right that no one should have to justify. Drop a comment below with your own Thompson moment, a time when you stood firm in your truth and created change. Your story might be the catalyst someone else needs.